Dear Abby, today I'm going to give you a little life update. As you know, we are off to a music festival later this summer, and going to a festival generally requires the use of a tent. Unless you're going to be glamping, in which case you literally have hot water and electricity. But we are not doing that. No, we want the true festival, camping, muddy experience. And the reason as to why we're not glamping has nothing whatsoever to do with the fact that we're students. So as I said, camping requires a tent, and my friend Fran and I use the same tent every year we go to a festival. And this year will be no different, so we decided to continue our tradition of putting the tent up about 6 weeks before, just to check it's still working and hasn't died. This year we were a bit apprehensive because it had been raining when we put it away last year, and I hadn't got it out of the bag since. So we were 99% sure we'd be greeted to a mouldy, ruined tent, and we would finally have to give in and buy a new one. So we opened the tent up, and to our great surprise, it wasn't mouldy. There was no mould, it wasn't ruined, didn't even smell damp. So we continued to put it up like we do every year. After being suspiciously successful and only having to swap the poles round twice, we had pitched our remarkably mould-free tent. To celebrate, we decided to get in the tent and start the spring cleaning process of getting all the crap out from last time. It was only once we were inside the tent that we realised there was a huge problem with it. Now Abs, I don't know how much camping you've done, but generally the concept of a tent, the whole purpose of its existence, is to keep you safe and dry from the outside and give you a little bit of privacy. This was what our tent looked like. As you can see from the picture, it stood well, it was standing nicely, but it was completely see-through. We were so confused. Had we been camping in a see-through tent all these years and just hadn't noticed? Oh no. The reason for the transparent nature of the tent was due to an incident that had occurred on the final day of last year's festival. Having seen the final act and drunk sufficient volumes of liquid to rehydrate, myself and my two friends gracefully walked back to our tent to turn in for the night. We got back, got changed, and my friends fell asleep pretty much straight away. I find it very difficult to sleep sometimes, and unfortunately for me, this was one of those nights. After lying awake for what felt like an eternity, but in reality was only about 20 minutes, I heard a rustling coming from outside the tent. Now, the rest of the campsite was pretty quiet based on the fact we were the last ones to turn in, and it was now nearing 5 o'clock in the morning. So naturally, my thoughts immediately went to, oh shit, there's a bear outside, I don't want to die. Don't judge me. We were all dead after surviving that weekend on about 6 hours sleep total. Fran had actually said the phrase, I'm so hungry, I've gone past the point of hungry into hungry earlier that day, a quote that we will never let her forget. But it just serves to highlight the level of exhaustion we're talking here. So in this state, a bear was the only logical explanation. The bear's rustling got louder and louder, and the walls of the tent began to shake. I was about to wake up my friends in complete fear when the bear began to talk. I believe the exact words were, how do you get into this mother? By this point I'd worked out that it probably wasn't a bear, but I was still terrified. Eventually, I saw a head pop up in the side wall of the tent. This person had managed to lodge himself between the mesh wall of the tent and the fly sheet, which I feel the need to point out, they're about that far away from each other. So how he'd managed to get underneath the fly sheet to do this, I will never know. I looked at him, he looked at me. I knew he'd messed up, and I could see in his eyes that it was slowly dawning on him that he realised he'd messed up. And with that, he just uttered the most defeated, oh, sorry, I've ever heard in my life. It was at this point that his friends found him and started yelling, Ben, that's the wrong tent, you. He simply replied that he'd figured that out for himself, thanks, and he tried to extract himself from the wall of our tent. However, as Ben tried to pull away, he fell and brought the fly sheet with him, resulting in a massive tear along the length of the fly sheet. Had I not been running on about 2 hours sleep from the night before, I probably would have been more bothered by this. What I actually did was wave goodbye to Ben, rolled over and went to sleep. Needless to say, my friends, who had somehow slept through this whole ordeal, were a bit confused as to why there was a giant hole in the side of our tent the following morning when there hadn't been one there before. Honestly, it took me a bit of racking my brains to try and remember what the hell had happened. So basically, our fly sheet was completely ruined, and instead of packing it up and putting it in the bag and taking it home, we decided to just bin it there and then, and we'd get a new one for the following year. It would have been great if we'd left a memo or a note or something just to remind us that we needed to do that. So this brings us to now, where I have to now go and order a new fly sheet, pray it arrives on time, and hope to God this one doesn't get destroyed. Maybe if we'd taken on board your tidying tips and tidied it away when we were packing it up, we wouldn't be in this situation now. See you next time, Abbs.
Dear Luce, so we're back again, another video. Yes, it's late.